PMFers, who's got that product market fit? Boo, 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 boo. I'm here with Django on PMFers. I think this is the episode 10 or so. The man, the myth behind Juicebox is Django. How you doing, Django?
Doing well. Origin story of Juicebox started with you, Austin. So excited to be here.
What?
Scaffold
Let's go.
D.
Let's dive right into it. Yeah?
Let's do it.
Hell yeah. So you started building Juicebox with a Scaffold.eth starter kit?
Yeah, it was my first time dabbling in Ethereum and really had very few places to start. I remember a few chat rooms I was in trying to ask ridiculous questions about ridiculously simple things, structures, etc. I had been previously building web architectures and Web 2 worlds and messing with banks and stuff, all of which were a pain in the ass. And Ethereum was a very clear solution for what I was trying to work on. But getting started was a mess. I think early days, 2018 ecosystem was, not that early days. I wasn't on day one, but it was still a slow roll to get tooling in order and community in order for noobs like me. And lo and behold, Austin Griffith coming through open calendar. I plopped in, I asked questions. You also laughed a little bit and said, "Oh, Django."
You don't know what to ask, right? You don't know what you don't know, and that's kind of just a common thing, and you don't even know the right question. You're asking the wrong question, and you have to dig in and kind of give more context for sure.
Yeah.
So even before that, let's back up even farther. Maybe little baby Django here. Where did you get started building? Like, what caused you to be a creator and create things that people would use?
Well, that's a great question. So I have always been very inclined to creating things. Technology was a product, like coding was a product of music for me, actually. I was making a lot of music, and then I needed to make a website to distribute the music. And so I decided I wanted to make a website. And then making a website and being kind of an Apple fanboy at the time, I was really into iPods. And then the iPhone came out, and then it was just like, okay, I need to figure out how to build iPhone apps. Like when I was in school, and it was a total joy kind of doing this whole production process. But I always treated it fairly artfully. It wasn't necessarily about the product or the actual business model necessarily. It was about tinkering with something that felt right, but I was still approximating how it should feel as a final form, and working with great friends who also had their creative inspirations that I could learn from and follow. And I think I was never like a solo dev. I was always very comfortable and obsessive in my solo moments, but always working with folks. And then I started building a roommate app, as one does in college. The most pressing problems is roommate coordination, and I needed something to, as a proof, something to build, to actually learn to build. Because I'm not a classroom kind of person. I may, watch a online lecture about something up until the point where I have enough to actually try something and play with something, and then I'll pause and then come back to it whenever I get stuck again. And Roommate app was like that thing for me. So started building that. It kind of became a little thing. A lot of friends were working on it. It was used throughout the university I was at. And then we started building the landlord side of the Roommate app and managing rent payments. So then that really sucked me into this world of managing banking relationships and remittances and fraud and all this banking related mess. And I was still treating it as an art project at the end of the day. We had one Slack channel where we invited everyone who used the app, both roommates and landlords and whoever was into it, and the team into this chat. That's where we built. So it was very, 2016 pre-DAO vibes with Web 2 product and a business model that was just kind of like tacked on to the end of rent payments, but always struggled with the actual business side of things, because we're we're creatives. We like to engineer stuff and hang out with our consumers instead of really position ourselves against consumers in this kind of extractive growth puzzle. At the same time, with the few funds that we had, we were running ads and whatnot, figuring out this like advertising growth model at the same time, and it was beginning to be a headache, considering like how business models work and they're kind of like the debt cycle involved, and meanwhile banks are a super mess to work with, and that all kind of, and then at the same time I'm living with someone who works at Coinbase in 2017, and I'm learning a little bit about crypto, more from the speculative angle, but he's an engineer, and I'm starting to get curious. And then all these things kind of came to a T when I realized, the way to express these new business models is with crypto, because the banks hate the whole rigmarole of money goes here and you programmatically make it do all these different things, but we love it in smart contract world. That's why we're here. So that's the long story short of how I ended up knocking on your door to actually teach me a little something about how to actually make banking relationships work. And then I ditched the startup, the actual product of the Roommate app, and just focused entirely on the business model that I was drawn to actually solve my problems then, and ended up becoming Juicebox, more of a branded as a DAO fundraising tool that was just right moment, right time. Yet the thing most interesting to me still is the business model. How do we create sustainable, growth-oriented business models that support retail customers, investors, builders alike?
Perfect segue into kind of your on-chain product market fit, and basically like on-chain traffic that happened because of you or on your product. And that was Juicebox. And can you tell us about it? Like who all was using it? What are some success stories coming out of Juicebox?
Sure. Yeah. So my story has always been about the people I work with, mainly Perry, Mios, Sage, kind of original friends from back in the day who were always vibing on projects together, and really building for ourselves. So like I said, we've always treated things a little bit more artfully instead of hardcore business market oriented. And sometimes right moment, right time leads to fruitful outcomes, and sometimes wrong moment, wrong time leads to us just building for ourselves in a little bit of a corner of the world, of the internet world. But some things you can't control, and we work on the things we can control. So we built Juicebox as an engine so that we can later build apps again powered by the Juicebox business model. And right when we deployed it, Perry deployed an art project called Tiles. So JBX was project ID number 1 on Juicebox. So the actual JBX was funded through Juicebox itself with the business model at its core. And then Tiles was an art project, project ID number 2, which great project, tiles.art. You can still go on it. It's still my favorite NFT project on Ethereum. You put in any address and it'll give you your tile that fits that address. And you can start designing tiles by configuring various Ethereum addresses. Brilliant concept. It was in early NFT days of 2021, around September of 2021, July, September of 2021. And it was a proof of concept enough of what it meant to sell art, pipe funds into a Juicebox, and manage the funds through a DAO. So we had two experiments now. We had JBX and we had Tiles, both first party, quote first party, but in the communities, everything is first party to some extent. So we had two projects, and then folks who were Tiles enjoyers, some of which enjoyed digging a bit deeper and taking curiosity in the token model underneath, the whole Juicebox dance, one of which was KenBot. And Kenny is a media guy, a former executive at some kind of big media things in the 90s. Very experimental, very energetic. Love Kenny to death. He was in Tiles and then was hanging out with some folks in the early Nouns Discord as they were about to launch Nouns. There was a group called Shark DAO emerging. who realized they couldn't afford one of the first few nouns, so they needed to get together, pool money, and bid on one of the first few nouns as a group. So Kenbot put me in touch with them. I was just listening to all their ideas. I wasn't as familiar as they were with nouns. And yeah, through that process, I had done a ton of thinking into like token modeling and fundraising dynamics, refund dynamics, all this stuff. Though Juicebox V1 wasn't perfect, it seemed like it had the right tools suited for them to do their thing. Though, like I'm sure folks love mechanism design, and when you give them a solution, they are often hard pressed to just accept your solution. They want to think of all the other solutions before they just take something off the shelf, which power to folks. I think that's a beautiful intuition. So a lot of that was just, asking questions and figuring out, hey, how might your idea also have a trade-off and expose certain risks? And then have you thought about those risks? So really being more of a consulting and like friend, given, the fact that I've thought a lot about trade-offs in this token space. Eventually, Noun 1 drops. We started Juicebox, SharkDAO. We get hundreds of folks all over the internet to put in thousands of ETH into this thing, and we miss out on Noun number 1, which was an amazing experience. It was such a thrill to be a part of that with this massive group of folks. But we win, I think, 5 of the first 20 nouns, which we still own as a group. So SharkDAO was a massive pop-up win. We successfully won some nouns. There's a few governance flaws thereafter, because governance was in its infancy and we were figuring it out as we went. But we felt something was in the air with community. The community joining together on the internet and doing something. But for now, it was all digital stuff. Tiles was digital art, nouns was digital art. It wasn't until November of that year that things really picked up, when Constitution now was
We're going to buy the Constitution.
Was murmured, and then it was like, oh man, this is off chain. This is new. We're going to actually do something new. It's very on brand. We're building a new world of finance here, and we want the document to represent this endeavor for the people. For the people.
Yeah.
People token was issued on day 1 of the Constitution DAO experiment, but that was really validated by SharkDAO, and SharkDAO was really validated by Tiles, and so it really starts with us doing our thing and like vibrating our craft out there, and then folks realizing, hey, these same tools can be leveraged to do things far beyond what we initially imagined.
There's a lot to unpack there, and I think that, like, let me hint at, you said friends, and you've always had friends around you. A lot of these PMFers that I've interviewed kind of end up saying friends were super important, and having like a circle of people to bounce ideas off of and try your apps. It sounds like you had a strong friend group from the start and then attracted some more friends along the way. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Cool.
I mean, the folks I've met along the way have been insane. Like the odds of meeting these folks in the real world doing real world things, like going to the grocery store, are so small. Like, such weirdos, such brilliant minds, such stubborn critics who just teach us so much as we're trying difficult things. And it inspired the best version of who I am. So I'm so grateful to have had this journey, ups and downs along the way. It's not always easy, but certainly friends.
And when you were talking about, you've spent a lot of time learning token dynamics, fundraising, kind of that path and those mechanics. Is there any TLDR from the learnings, or is it just like this depth of learning where you almost have to have a question to have an answer? Like, is there some aha moment along the way of token dynamics and how to fundraise and what was wrong and what was right?
Man, that's a good question. something that's always been tempting is finding templates, like a very easy one-stop shop, beep boop, you're fundraising, you're on your way, which has always been tempting. But anytime we stop to ask, like, all right, what does that beep boop fundraise look like? There's always a debate. So there's always 3 or 4 or 5 like interesting ways that folks feel should be defaults. And that's always changing over time, depending on the meta, depending on priorities, depending on the project. Every project that wants to fundraise to fund their thing or run revenues through their network is going to be set up in a different way. They're going to have different priors. They're going to have different ambitions. And so Juicebox really became an expression, a tool that used to express any number of fundraises. And then it's really the clients, the web client's job to actually tune the tools to a particular outcome and then for a particular audience. But I've always felt that Juicebox as a protocol should be the language with which you can express certain fundraisers, which I think can be frustrating to a lot of folks who are more interested in product and like getting to market first and simple and making something you can learn in 10 minutes, where I think the things that stand the test of time really are adaptable or customizable, are human first, to understand what's being articulated, and obviously safe and secure.
So how did you like get your first 10 users? I know it's probably friends that you're showing the stuff to, but like what is that like on the ground process of here's this prototype for Juicebox. Do you want to dink around with it? Like how did you get those first users?
First 10 users were definitely Tiles users.
Okay.
So the beauty of Juicebox, I think Juicebox, when it's working best, you don't hear the word Juicebox. It's behind the scenes, it's tucked away, and you talk about the projects that are built using Juicebox instead. From those projects, those who are interested will trickle in to Juicebox. So Shark DAO, for instance, folks were there for the nouns, and there's a few folks who stuck around Juicebox DAO because that was most exciting to them. So I think Tiles is the most poignant first 10 user example because it was a very simple art project built by Perry, who's just like aesthetically brilliant and had this brilliant idea that he pursued to its end. So also has that stubborn mindset who just gets to the finish line. And it wasn't necessarily easy, but at the same time, right place, right time. NFTs were a thing. DAOs were in its early murmurings, so folks were interested in what they could mean. And so it was a little bit easier to pierce through the void and just attach to these words that were a little unfamiliar to us. Like we didn't really think of ourselves as a DAO. We were actually confused. Like, should we name ourselves DAO or not? Like, are we a DAO? But leaning in a little bit into the energy of the moment drew some attention, and then doing something that is honest and new. I think sticks out in what became a large inflated bubble of sometimes authentic things, sometimes less authentic things for the sake of capitalizing on the moment. So being ourselves, doing it for ourselves, and being very open to who came through, and never really positioning ourselves as more important or more founder-like than the next person. I think we consider Juicebox as like a big spectrum of foundership, and there's a lot of important people who are still around, some who popped in, contributed a lot, and then went on to do other things. And I think that human aspect of just being good people who cared about the people around and were genuinely there because we loved being there, that also creates some attractive force, at least for certain communities.
All right, perfect. I want to kind of tangent away. I don't know why my camera's doing so flashy stuff, but I want to tangent away from that and just think about your ideation process. So how do you come up with ideas? Where do your best ideas come from? When do your best
Ooh.
ideas pop up?
Yeah. I love notebooks and pen and paper. So I will go out on a walk often. I love long walks. I love pen and paper. I love my solitude. Um, so a lot of my ideas, at least, are hinted at through those processes, and then I start to write down and consolidate, think about trade-offs and actual dynamics and whatnot. I think my ideas are oftentimes more motivated by theoretical optimas rather than market optimas, which I think is a shortcoming of mine. For example, Juicebox v4 was just released. It is omni-chain Juicebox, meaning you can deploy your project on any chain, EVM chain, so mainnet, Base, Optimism, Arbitrum, fundraise wherever, issue your one unified token across all these chains. It took us until February to design that, build it, audit it, deploy it. 2 years ago, the pressure was deploy on L2s. Juicebox has been mainnet only for a while. We could just have deployed Juicebox on all these chains, but then every project would have to pick which chain they're on. And if they did multiple, then they would have discontiguous tokens on each. So these wouldn't all attach. And so instead of really following like the market, moment and being like, we need to put Juicebox everywhere, would have been fairly easy. But I think the more interesting idea to me is, and the end game would obviously be, a business and a community and a campaign should meet users where they are, and you should figure out how to deploy, how to issue a token outward wherever the users pay in from. And so more interested in that theoretical optima than the like, all right, how do we get the next, the next campaign on an L2 in to make sure gas is cheap, knowing that at the end of the day, these like 1-2 year timeframes end up feeling pretty short in the longer scheme of things when you just commit to the actual right idea, and take the risk on the right idea actually being wrong over time. So it takes a fair amount of conviction, a fair amount of talking to folks around and making sure that folks buy in. Surely not everyone buys in all the time. It's okay. Meanwhile, listening to other ideas and critiquing and weighing trade-offs therein. But man, I love a good idea at the end of the day, and I love having good ideas critiqued as much as possible, like grinding them down. I love it when my ideas are grinded down. I think we all end up better treating ideas a little less precious and adaptable as we actually start to implement. And then obviously always be responsible for the implementation. I think an idea without the actual energy and patience to actually do it, the actual hard bit, is not really worth that much.
Awesome. There's a lot of great stuff there. So when you, I kind of like to dig into the cross-chain stuff, even though it has nothing to do with ideas. This is an interesting technology. It seemed to me like you've got an L2 app, you would allow your users to put it, or you've got an L1 app, you'd allow your users to choose their L2 and go to it, but you didn't do that. You wanted to have this kind of L2 interop like thing,
Yeah.
which we really need in Ethereum now. You need to just YOLO to one network and it goes to all of them somehow, right? So what tech is used with Juicebox to be able to do L2 interop without L2 interop?
Yeah. So the actual need, if I were to express the need, it would again be a first party need. It would be like, what do we need as JBX? So JBX is the protocol token. It collects fees from the protocol. If we were to issue the protocol, if we were to deploy the protocol on, let's just say, Base, then we'd have a different project ID number one than on mainnet. Fees over here would issue a different token. You would need an off-chain entity to then coordinate between the two to make it feel like if I invested in one network, if I have a token in one network, I benefit from Juicebox as a whole ecosystem, right? Okay, so that's what we need to solve, is we need fees coming in anywhere to benefit the token holder everywhere. So how do we do that? Is we deploy the protocol on all the chains. So let's just take two, for example, mainnet and base. We make sure that all of the addresses are the same. So the project ID number 1 on both chains is the same token. It has the same operating rules. So issuance is this. Here's how issuance decays over time. Here's how revenue can be accessed from those instances. But so far, these are isolated systems. The bridging thing that we have going is, we call it suckers. So you can move your tokens from one chain to the other chain. And when you do so, you necessarily move a proportional share of the underlying revenue with the tokens. So let's just say chain 1 has 10 tokens and 10 ETH in it. Chain 2 has 10 tokens and 10 ETH in it. If I'm a token holder on chain 1, I can bridge my token over, my 1 token over. And when I do, I bridge 1 ETH over as well, automatically by the system. So now I have 11 tokens, 11 ETH on this chain, 9 tokens, 9 ETH on this chain. So the fact that the tokens are always backed by the underlying revenue allows the economic energy to kind of compensate a lack of technical glueware between everything, such that there's actual incentives for arbitrage and to kind of have money move to where there's more activity to actually fill demand for liquidity, depending on where a project is fundraising most, which is hard to tell ahead of time. But the goal is a project can deploy and then checkbox style just say, I want to deploy this project on Ethereum, Base, Optimism, Arbitrum, and then deploy. One button deploy, one transaction deploy, and then you are live everywhere. A user can go in anywhere and pay right where they are, and they'll get the same token right where they are. So there's no bridging happening at all. The only bridging that happens is the secondary motion of actually re-equalizing the whole network to satiate these more kind of meta financial needs that should be taken care of by the more financial class. But surely we're in early innings here, and there hasn't been much of that activity yet.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, sort of. I sort of get it, but I think that like the TLDR would be like the liquidity follows the token wherever it goes, and you make sure you kind of have a matching pair on whatever network, and then everything has the same address everywhere. And then you guys are probably doing a little bit of maintenance on the back end to move that liquidity around as they move their tokens, or maybe it just like is tied together. Yeah. They move the okay, cool.
Yeah, the zero maintenance, and like the beauty is like Juicebox is concerned with token issuance more so than token swaps. So an issuance really means like there's no liquidity concern a priori, right? Every treasury starts with 0 ETH in it and 0 tokens outstanding and issues new tokens as ETH comes in. So it's great because you can have all these different treasuries and they can all issue the token wherever ETH comes in. And then as like Juicebox does has this buyback function, so that such that if there's a Uniswap pool that eventually emerges that offers a better rate than issuance, then funds get routed to buy back instead of feeding the Juicebox. But that's a secondary motion outside of the Juicebox protocol. So we let that happen, and we concern ourselves with like fundraising and token issuance, which the value prop there is just be where your customers are instead of forcing them into a network that they're less comfortable or don't want to be.
Got it. So even if like I have ETH on Scroll and I want to buy your token, then I just buy it on Scroll and I get it on Scroll. And if you guys have to balance it, you can, but it just all happens there. Okay, cool. I think I've got it. So now that you have this idea of it's got to be L2 interop, go to them where they are, or just any generic idea, how do you go about like validating that idea? How do you know that that idea was a good idea, or even start testing if that idea was a good idea?
Oh, man, take all this with a grain of salt. I'm not a great like UX research advisor. I do rely maybe sometimes a little too heavily on my own self-critique, but I personally try as hard as I can to find the most elegant solution with as few mechanical levers as possible to resolve all user journeys that I think are relevant. That when you're dealing with a community, there's a lot of calls and like Figma files where you diagram and you invite others to critique alongside of you. So I say I, but I really mean me and others around. And and then really just try to, as hard as possible, find the theoretical edge cases. So what can go wrong? So we trust our own knowledge of systems fairly well. We trust our own honesty to actually say the things that are wrong or that are risky upfront. Knowing that every solution is going to have risks, every solution will have trade-offs. We just need to be very clear about the trade-offs. We have to have a very clear path to implementation. So we have to know all the tools that we need to use to actually pull this off. So there's a lot of self-trust too. There's a little bit of like trust and money in the bank too. So, can we actually live our actual like lives while we build this thing? Or because, this might be hard to pitch like in the middle of something. It's a little bit like cuckoo from the start, but once it starts to manifest, it might be an easier thing to entice future projects or investors with. And then once you've done all of the thinking of, hey, what are all the ways that this won't work? Then you've kind of done the hard bit, I think. But you have to treat that with as much honesty as possible. And if you're not obsessed with finding like the right theoretical solution, I think, I can't justify doing years worth of work if I don't go through that first. But at the same time, a lot of folks are more market oriented and they like putting out ideas quickly into the market, validating with users, validating, on paper with users. And I think that's a super valid way to do things too, depends on what outcomes you want. But I personally think for smart contract oriented infrastructure for businesses and, campaigns like Constitution DAO and Shark DAO and the like, and Juicebox, kind of our number one customer ourselves. We are building something that needs to stand the test of time. We do not want any central intermediary. We do not want any operational risk. We do not want any risk of platforms changing on us. So if we can write the right thing, then we can rely on it forever, and that is worth far more than the whims of market feedback on a week-to-week basis for the stuff that we are building. And it's not quite totally validated, but I think the folks who appreciate that mindset are really attracted to fundraising and operating on Juicebox.
So let's kind of go the other way. Let's talk about an idea that came up that you tried to validate and then eventually just didn't work. And sometimes it's really hard, like you said, to be honest with yourself. It's even harder to let go of you come up with some very elegant solution and it's all you can think about and you think it's right, but it's not right. And it takes a long time. But let's just talk about like how to let the idea go or when to know when to let the idea go. Obviously, there's not a
Yeah,
great time,
yeah,
but you've had to let ideas go, right? Like what's the
yeah,
process there?
yeah. I'll start with one. It's a little bit more of an engineering
Perfect.
kind of fixation that we had to let go. So in thinking about this omni-chain dynamic, our initial way to structure the incentives to actually make this network work was this staking type beat, where if I am an owner of a network on one chain, I can stake to kind of earn tokens on another chain. It was elegant in some ways, but complex and didn't really solve the problem as directly as the subsequent solution that we hadn't really come up with yet. But we were fairly deep in implementing it. So we had, it's still on the shelf. We still look at it. We still have potential use cases to pull it off the shelf and then use it again. But really, the thing that causes us to let it go is not focusing on the implementation, but really focusing on the problem we're trying to solve, and then realizing when there's a better solution. And when we can articulate the better solution, then it happens automatically in your brain. It's like anytime you start to work on the thing that isn't the best, then you've already swallowed the sunk cost. but you're sinking more cost, and it doesn't feel right. And so it's
You can
always
feel it.
feels better to work on the thing that actually is better. But you have to focus on the actual goal of what you're trying to do, and not the actual implementation or work you've already done. Knowing that, hey, in the future, this might be useful for something else, which is nice to convince yourself of in the moment. But it's usually just a tool that gets you to actually go on to the next thing with haste and not looking back. And then there's another example which I can give you, which is more of an application, which was a micro success. So a project called DeFifa, which we ran for the World Cup. It's a prediction market, NFT-based prediction market, where each of the World Cup teams are NFTs. There's a kind of pre World Cup window where people can mint the teams that they think are going to win, and then it gets locked, and then kind of there's a self-auto deciding function of the tokens that decide who actually wins the tournament, depending on real world outcomes, blah, blah, blah. Ran a really good instance of it, but then realized afterwards that we want to do more of these, but we still have the same underlying problem that we did with all the other work we did, which is like we want to route revenues from these things because revenues are important to sustaining a network, but we don't want to open up more DAOs or governance burden or management burden. So we can't just focus on DeFifa now, because then we wouldn't really have the right place where we're actually managing revenues from. So we have to take our step back and go focus on the revenue engine and make sure that once we can come back to DeFifa, then we can just plug it straight into the revenue network, and then we can focus on the application. So many instances of like going a little bit too quickly to the application layer and realizing the most interesting thing here, the world-changing thing here are smart contracts. It has to do with the agreements between users and builders and investors. And if we focus too much on apps and we just pull revenues kind of extractively from the top layer, or even worse, don't take revenues in the name of donationism or nonprofitism, then we're gonna get really temporarily excited, but then be left with a really kind of tricky predicament down the line. So let's take a step back. Let's build a revenue engine correctly, and then let's go all in on apps. So patience is the most valuable thing in finding folks who are willing to, have fun while working on things relentlessly with a little bit of patience and belief. I think is very, very tricky, but I think it works out over time.
This is just another area where ideas pop up too, where you're going to build product A, but then you lay out the infra for product A and you realize that there's like this piece of infra that doesn't exist yet either. So you've got to go build that first. And I think that's kind of a lot of what you're telling me is like you reach this, oh, okay, we got to go back and build this thing first. Then you get that nice cornerstone built, and then the house looks better, and then you can put a lot more layers to it. But then you get to another thing. It's like, shit, we got to go back and lay it down. It's got to feel good to kind of lay these things down and have it all start to work together. Like, are you starting to feel that vision of a lot of ideas finally coming together here, or is it still down the road a little bit?
It feels super good. So we deployed everything right before ETH Denver, so mid-February. And then it took about a month to have the confidence to be like, it's done. It's done.
We can talk about it. Yeah.
We can talk about it. I can tell people to consider using it, albeit know the risks. And now I'm in full talking about it mode. And I miss those mid 2021 days of having finished Juicebox V1, founding our footing, being able to talk about it and putting weight behind it. So I'm excited to see what those moments look like in this next wave here. But boy, am I excited to be done with some of these pieces and actually onto the application layer, onto the social layer, finding the right words, the right stories to actually communicate this out and making it all about the people again.
And folks can go experience this at juicebox.money. right? That's the kind of the landing spot.
Juicebox.money. Yeah, so landing spot. Juicebox.money is your tried and true Juicebox experience, open-ended tools to help you fund your thing. You can schedule your kind of issuance policy, how money moves around, and change those rules over time. You're very much in control. RevNet, the RevNet app, which RevNets are a capital formation structure built using Juicebox, where you deploy a RevNet with the levers fixed in place and how they evolve fixed in place, kind of like Bitcoin, where 21 million coins, halvenings every so and so blocks. The numbers don't really matter. What matters is that we all can rely on those numbers and we can all
the rules.
work together in place. So the idea behind RevNets is you schedule the rules up front, your issuance policy, how the revenue can be accessed via cashing out tokens. And that's consistent for everyone over time. In Juicebox lingo, it's like the project is owned by the RevNet contract, which fixes these rules. And it's a great kind of Bitcoin-like token for you to apply to your revenue-generating business that you want to automate growth, like networked growth between your customers, your investors, and yourselves. So that's also a great landing spot. app.revnet.eth.sucks is your CTA there. And then lastly, the most current thing that we've been doing is we made a collection, an art collection for Banny. If you remember, Banny has accompanied Juicebox since the very beginning. It's a banana who is sipping juice, smoking a blunt, and hacking away at a PC. It's a collection of stickers that Sage has drawn that has proliferated in the Juicebox Discord. Banny's a cultural icon. We created a collection at retail.banny.eth.sucks, which is a shopping experience. It's a retail shopping experience where you can shop for bannies, shop for outfits. We have one drop currently out there, the Genesis collection. You can, give your banny some hair, a dress, a dagger, whatever you wish. You can mint on any chain. So these assets exist on any chain. And the sales get piped directly into the BAN RevNet. So it's an end-to-end example of how omni-chain Juicebox works, of how RevNets work. And you can interact via a cartoon where you don't have to give a shit about any of those other things. You can just play with it and see how retail might feel in a world where loyalty points are baked in and where you don't have to pledge allegiance to one chain or another. You can meet customers exactly where they are. So if you go to the community activity page, you can see all the bannies that have currently been minting. You can see they're all over. Some are on Base, some are on Ethereum, some are on ARB, some are on UP. They're beautiful. They represent tokenized revenue. So in a world where everyone around us is tokenizing everything except for revenue, we are saying tokenized revenue is the point of smart contracts. It is why we're here. It is what matters most is customers should own future revenues of the networks they pay into, that they participate in. So this is the collection. You're seeing it now. If you go to Manifesto and click Ban RevNet in Manifesto, you go to where all the funds from sales are piped into. So if you pay here directly, it's the same as if you were to have bought something from the Banny site. You can see payments are coming in from everywhere. And if you go to the very top,
Ethereum, Arbitrum. Yeah.
If you go to the very top and you hover over balance, you'll see that the balance is everywhere.
Really nice.
It's ETH from all these tokens, and it backs the same BAN token. So it's the same address on all these chains. And then lastly, if you open up one more tab and go to juicebox.money
/ETH, hold on, let me get that.
Or just click into the Banny project in front of you.
Oh, right here. This one?
Yeah, you'll notice it's the same thing. It's a Juicebox project under the hood. It works the same way. It's kind of one smart contract box engine that's expressed as a RevNet. It's a retail experience kind of on the surface. And you can see how we're just getting started here, but it maps to this world of kind of emergent commerce. And
gotta bring this one up too. Look at this.
Yep, there it is. Old school, but here it is. It still has money in it, by the way.
We should do something with that, shouldn't we?
We should do something with it. Yes, we should.
I'm down. Yes, let's talk about that. Heck yeah. Okay, awesome. All right, all right. Let's zoom in now on capital allocation. Specifically, I think we've done a really good job of, if you are a smart developer, you can get in and get educated quickly. There's a lot to it, but you can get friends, you can take on tutorials, you can go to speed run Ethereum and you can learn how to build, you can pull up scaffold ETH and you can learn how to quickly make an app. But the hard part is going pro, basically, raising money for your project and finding the correct capital allocation mechanism that can fund you and your project correctly.
Sure.
Let's just like dive straight into like, what is your opinion on the best way for Ethereum to accelerate projects?
Yeah, great question. I think there are smarter people than I that have been thinking a lot more about capital allocation in a mechanistic sense. The way I approach it, my obsession has been revenues and like tokenizing fundraisers and revenues. So RevNets are my current thesis and what I'm currently leaning into more and more. But it is new. There's not a lot of examples, so I can't really draw from a lot of that. But I think it is a great place, like Bitcoin-like place to attract investors who may be afraid of governance risk, to attract customers who may be afraid of paying for things on chain, but hey, you get a part of this network, and for builders who maybe don't want to open up a can of worms of governance or management as they're actually operating their thing. At the same time, a regular Juicebox.money project will give you all the tools to actually think about, hey, if you want to issue tokens and do like TGEs, or which are token blah blah blah
Generation
something.
events?
Yeah. Token generation events.
The
There's
details,
ways to
I know.
use Juicebox money for those purposes, and a lot of DeSci projects have used it in that sense. So your typical Juicebox starts out with 0 Ethernet and 0 tokens. You set an issuance policy, so let's say 1 million of your project's tokens per ETH in, and then you reserve a percent. So let's say 50% is reserved for, let's say 25% for me, 25% for you, Austin. So then as 1 ETH comes in, then 1 million tokens are out, 500,000 go to the payer, and then we each get 250,000, right? So you're creating this distribution as funds come in. One of those splits might go to funding a liquidity pool, or kind of funding a DAO that's governed by all the token holders. So the actual percentages are where people tend to get hung up on. But the important thing is that you have these tools where you can make certain promises and enforce certain guarantees. But the most important thing when starting a fundraise, when I help folks think about these unknowns, is I think the most important thing is focusing on the project. So what you're trying to do, why you're trying to fundraise, what you're going to do with the money, what do you need, and then being very clear about what you know and what you don't know. So if you don't necessarily know what your tokens are for yet, but you want to maybe involve communities' opinions in certain decision making, or you want to maybe return revenues to current funders, but you have certain legal curiosities that you're not sure about yet. If you want to do these kinds of things, it's worth just laying out your desires, your uncertainties, and being clear along the way. And then offering very clear, tangible rewards for folks who are contributing. If you're doing more of a traditional fundraise that maybe feels more like Kickstarter, maybe those are tiered rewards that correlate to either digital assets or digital assets that you can then use for off-chain fulfillment of certain goods or services, certain opportunities. So really, make your project a thing folks want to be a part of, with the bonus of making it investable, which I think oftentimes means how is it going to grow its revenues and actually recycle the revenue to grow the network. And then, if there are special capital allocation systems like quadratic funding or like certain grants that you think are applicable to actually incite more attention to your project, I think that can just click, those allocation mechanisms can click the same button to get into your campaign just like anyone else. But the reality is it's the accumulation of a lot of small contributions that really make a network feel alive. And it's slow sometimes to get those that ball rolling, and you'll learn a lot as you try. But the confidence it takes just to be like so into your idea and your project that you're going to go for it anyways, usually is the crazy energy that over time really starts to motivate folks to believe in you or ask the right questions that'll cause you to reflect on the economics of the matter or the actual incentives that you're offering, to maybe relinquish a little bit of leverage that you have as a project owner to actually build a community that is well balanced and honors folks' risk that they're taking by helping you. But like in general, what I think about more is capital formation more than capital allocation. So capital formation I think of as the system that attracts capital in, and then capital allocation I think of more of like once money's in and I have N choices of where to put the money, how do I distribute them evenly? So I'm more like, hey, out of all the N choices, how can I make them as attractive as possible to get the money that you've creatively accumulated? So that's why I would probably punt the conversation of allocation to folks in Allo or other folks who've thought at length about these things.
Formation, capital formation. I should have led with that as the question. Is just like, what is your method of capital formation? And it's sort of like you've got people that are interested in your project that may want to buy into a token, but how many tokens do you give them, and how do you
Yeah.
split those, and where can other things go? And you're saying Bitcoin, like, this money isn't going to a human that a human is dividing up. This is code is law. It's landing in a smart
Yes.
contract, and it's
Yes.
doing what the code is supposed to do, and no one can control it.
Exactly. And so the quick overview of how RevNets work and why I love it so much. When money goes in, so let's just say 1 million tokens, the rule is 1 million tokens split 50%, half goes to me, half goes to you. So 1 ETH comes in, it stays in the box. 1 million tokens are issued, half go to the payer, half go to me, or a quarter go to me, a quarter go to you. So now we have token distribution, but the ETH stays in the box. Normally, when you think about a DAO, the ETH belongs to a DAO and it's at the mercy of governance. So that ETH can slip away. It can be, people will justify it as like it's operating capital and it's used to actually fuel the thing that's being done. Great, but it's also a risk to capital allocators, right? So if that money can slip away, it's no bueno. Instead, RevNets, the only way to access the money is to cash out tokens and then access a portion of the money. And you're going to pay a slight cash out tax if you're going to access the money before others. So there's a slight bias to hold on and not access more so than access the capital. But if we're running a project, we need to actually use our tokens to actually access the capital and use it. And since RevNets know that the coins are backed by the revenue, and that's a hard fixed number, the RevNet will actually accept the coins as collateral and offer you a loan. So you can just give the RevNet your coins. It'll give you some loans from its underlying value. It'll charge a fee back into itself, which benefits the whole network. And then you can go and then use your loan to actually give your collateral more value or drive more revenues, and later pay it back and get your coins back. So you have this system that's everyone, builders, investors, retail users, they all have the same coin and they all have the same rules of how to access the underlying funds. And everyone is oriented towards growth of revenue more so than access of revenue right now. And if builders want to access revenue, they're foregoing future revenue because they're burning their tokens to access a little bit now. So, it's clarifying for investors too, to be like, oh, this builder basically just burned all their tokens to access money now. Well, now they have no access to future money. So like what gives, So it allows everyone to due diligence project easier, removes operational and governance risk. It scopes the amount of leverage a team has, the issuance policy works very mechanically over time, similar to Bitcoin.
Awesome. Okay, let's tangent. Just maybe a few minutes left, if that's okay. Okay, so tangenting kind of away from a lot of this stuff to AI. How much are you using AI? What's your AI usage look like these days? What are you using it, or how often are you using it?
Great question. I use AI every day. Right now, I'm doing a lot of marketing, a lot of storytelling. So in Banny world, as I'm marketing Banny, I use it to generate backgrounds for my models. So Bannies are models; they're fashion models, and they need backgrounds to showcase them in pretty places.
Not
So
AI models, but like models.
models, baby.
Yeah.
But yeah, but you know, a model is a model. You know, a model is a model. So I use AI a lot for like a creative execution environment. Like I have an idea, like I want, every day I go and I open up chat and I'm like beach, mountaintop, and airplane. And then it like in a context that it already knows it's generating images that I'm going to put a model in later, right? Like a Banny kind of fashion model in. So I just like every day I just kind of vomit 3 locations and it generates me images and I make posts. That's number one thing I do. Number 2 thing I do is, you know, basic search. Number 3 thing I do, I guess when I was doing more of the coding aspect of the project, there was certainly like the cursor AIs and whatever that's easy to kind of just auto-complete a repetitive code chunk. I never use it to write code for me. I'm a risk mitigator at heart. Like I'm a risk person, so I would never trust it with a production financial app. Plus, I know how hard it is to write really good, like succinct, optimized code. But I would dabble with vibe coding for like throwaway things. I think that's fine. But I have a little bit maybe too much respect for good code. Or not good code that I know what's happening as I'm offering it to people. Not saying my code is good. I'm just saying like I know what's there and I can explain it to someone and to myself. Apart from that, man, probably all kinds of bullshit. Let me pull up, and I usually keep like a chat open. I keep a Claude open, sometimes a Gemini open. I don't do a lot of deep research, to be honest. I'm not I like learning things, but I haven't been in the deep learning mood lately. I'll probably, get into one of those soon, but right now I'm still in all-in building, selling mode. I'm designing a Banny game. So I'm designing a Banny game with chat's help. So, like helping
Mechanics
giving
of the
it
game,
a
sort of.
prompt, helping it I give it a prompt of how this game should work, and then I'm like, all right, let's play this game. So then it's like an execution environment for this game. I use it for translations. I use it. I'm building a house right now, so I use it. I could go on and on. This could go for another hour of just like random shit that I use it for.
So all the time, you're all constantly bouncing off stuff off of ChatGPT, just like we talked about how important friends are. ChatGPT is just a new friend that you can bounce stuff off of and make sure that they have everything and they have so much context for the world. Yeah.
It's more like a smart Google search to me than it is a friend, I think.
Okay.
It's an ultra powerful Google search that I can, it will answer the thing I ask it to do, regardless of if it's retrieval or creativity. But I don't confide in it with like emotional matters. I have a little bit of a privacy limit with engaging with especially cloud-based GPTs. Yeah.
And you said that you would never let a computer write your code, but there may be the day may come that a computer is better than you at writing the code. And at that point, I think you almost have to let it do it, right? But we can, that's again, like we could go deep into these conversations.
I'm going to be a stubborn old Django that's going to be, it's going to be telling the kids they're wrong.
Old man shouts at clouds kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just kidding. I think there's a future where that will happen. But I think, think about like the most clean, beautiful protocols, and think about like our world running on them. Like let's take Bitcoin, for example. You would never it's so small and beautiful. It doesn't matter who writes it. It's the fact that you can all read it and understand it, right? It's simple enough to get it. So who cares who actually did the writing? I don't give Juicebox as much credit as Bitcoin. It's a larger framework, but hopefully it's enough to express a flurry of outcomes, the financial outcomes, that you can just tweak little knobs to get to new, interesting results. I wouldn't trust, it's impossible to prompt a Juicebox into existence. Maybe you can prompt versions of Juicebox that leverage the core to actually do creative things. but I think there are certain foundational things that you want to, if not right, you want it to be heavily audited and edited by ideally everyone. Like ideally everyone has a chance to audit and edit it. Obviously, that's not going to happen for anything, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Like things that stand the test of time are going to be human written just by virtue of it being human edited like 1,000 times over and over.
Good stuff. We'll go back to this maybe in 5 years. You and I can look back at this video while I don't even know where we'll be, floating in a sky ship somewhere, laughing, hopefully. Okay, last couple questions. What does Ethereum need to do right now? Do you see the Ethereum space, and do you see where it needs to move, and do you see the FUD? What do you think Ethereum needs to do right now?
Yeah, man, it's so funny watching all this like chainisms and folks thinking things are bad or good or whatever. I just think Ethereum just needs to not go down. Like it is like its number one job. Like I'm building business infrastructure that helps folks run unstoppable like token dynamics for their businesses on top. The network just needs to be the network where I feel comfortable. This is the way I put it. The network, I feel comfortable exercising my out of the money put options when the world is on fire and the markets are nuking. So where can I actually make my insurance money, claim my insurance money when everything else is broken? So if Ethereum does not go down, it is where every business will want to always manage its infrastructure for revenues, for fundraising, for agreements, for everything. If Ethereum doesn't go down, everything else is secondary. Everything else is downstream of that, and it doesn't really matter. Like we can do the omni-chain things on our ends. Like sure, Ethereum can have its own native L2s or whatever. Juicebox was just going to make that as another option. At the end of the day, like customers and businesses are going to want to meet their customers wherever they are. Like Ethereum's main thing is just don't go down and just focus on that. And it's okay to be done at some point. It's okay. And if people say that you're not good enough, that's okay. Let them. Like I don't. It's totally okay. So I'm a little bit less of an Ethereum like is behind, or an Ethereum needs to do something better or catch up, or I'm all about aspirations and incremental improvements for UX sake and for things like that. And I think it sounds like there's going to be good progress there, but never sacrifice the quote ideological values of being permanent. And like that is not an ideological like religion like purity test. It is just like the most obvious thing a blockchain is good for. It's like don't fail ever, and then you're good.
It does.
Then
It is, right? It is a public settlement, is a global settlement layer that never goes down, that anyone can get to, that's censorship resistant. Like it's basically doing that now and has been for a long time. But I do think there were some apps that were bangers that made a ton of revenue that Ethereum could have been better positioned to facilitate, and they didn't. And I kind of wish they did.
Okay, fair enough. I do see a lot right now. I see a lot of like the Solana Foundation funding things. So, there's a pop-up happening in my city here right now in Brazil, and I see everyone wearing Solana shirts, and it's like sponsored by Solana Foundation. And I'm like, Ethereum Foundation would never, like a small little pop-up and being like just funded. But at the same time, I kind of reflect on,
should they?
Yeah, that's what I think. I'm like, should they? And because my like I guess investigator brain is always thinking about like, where does the money come from, and like kind of, and I like when things that are revenue generating have this reciprocal effect of being able to then pour out a splash of cash to the next generation tinkerers. I don't necessarily think like the VC is the end all be all. I think hopefully like retail is more empowered there as well. But I don't want EF to be a VC either, like I think that sounds icky. And I don't want EF to have a very super powerful business model that like gives it increasing revenue in a system so that it can splash out growth expenses more. So I think there's like,
but maybe someone should. Maybe there's an entity that does that EF funds that is doing some of this stuff. Like that would be okay with you.
Yeah. I'm open to experimenting. I'm not going to spend too much time critiquing it. I think as long as it prioritizes don't go down and never skimps on that promise for any superfluous reason, I'm at peace. But yeah, I like the more research, angle of how might it be more private as first principle? How might it be? I think the gas burn, the staking, like all that was pretty darn brilliant. How it all came together, and those are massive improvements to things. And I'm happy to build on Ethereum with those updates in place. The UX stuff upcoming, I'm excited to see how that plays out.
7702, baby.
Yeah, the funding thing is where I think we have the most interesting space to experiment. I'm hoping Juicebox and RevNets offer a tool that EF can use to actually maybe start engaging in things in less of a donationist way and more of a like, hey, we are actually building a new era of capital formation here, one that can compete with the SAFE agreement, with the C Corp operating structure, and that actually uses on-chain agreements as its end-all be-all because the legal system is finicky and sometimes inconsistent. Old operating agreements don't really, aren't really accessible in the ways that the open internet wants or needs them to be. And so, how might we progress those conversations in a way that feels in line with I hate to say the word, but with the values of doing things somewhat sustainably over time, which I think is what we're all after. It's not values of good or bad or right or wrong. I think it's just we understand that we want this thing to last a long time, and that sustainability mechanism kind of intricacy is a valid thing to think about.
Word. Yep. And I want it to last for a long time too. I just see some short goals that I think we could have hit better, but it is what it is. And well, I just think that if you were a nation state and you were going to deploy and you needed a sufficiently decentralized technology that was X price and X speed, you may find Ethereum to be too decentralized and too slow, and you may find an L2 to be not decentralized enough, but fast enough. You may end up on another alt L1 that solves these things good enough.
Sure.
And I think that's where we should have been catching some folks, I think. But I'm an idiot. I'm seeing this from my own perspective. Yeah.
Also fair. And I'm excited to see how this shakes out. I would love, I'm personally less of a chain maxi. I think a lot of the capital formation settlement stuff is best served on Ethereum mainnet for the reasons I described earlier. But I think, projects want to meet customers where they are. They want to take in Bitcoin wealth to fund their thing. So they want to take Solana wealth to fund their thing. They want I think projects in my ideal world, they don't really. It's not that users don't care where they are, which is the current narrative. It's users don't care which chains they're on. I'm well, I know a lot of users who do. So let's meet them where they are. But I think projects in general want to just be funded wherever the users want to support them at. They don't want to be chain maxis. They're only doing it because they get support and grants if they are. So how might we open up more access to capital to flow between? But at the end of the day, I think the actual revenue-backed tokens are best settled on Ethereum for the reasons to not go down.
And I think it's going to. I think Ethereum will continue and will be a global settlement layer and will not go down and will be credibly neutral. Yes. I think it will do that thing. And I think we'll continue to scale the L1, and I think we'll continue to make the L2 experience less fragmented, and I think all of those will be good.
Let's go.
We'll just see how it goes. Okay. So last question. It's my most silly question. We only have a minute or two, but what would you say your superpower is? What is your superpower, Jango?
Blah, blah, blah. Damn. All right. My superpower is patience and persistence. I don't mind working on something for a long time.
Amazing. That's awesome. You are willing to just be dedicated to a thing, just completely enthralled in the thing and doing the thing and completely engulfed and consumed by it for a
I'm willing to
long
believe.
time.
I'm willing to believe in things.
You're a
And
believer.
yeah.
Heck yeah. Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Django. Thank you for all the building that you do. Keep building cool things. Let's get people on Juicebox money. Let's get more people deploying RevNets and making revenue and finding product market fit and raising for their product using these Bitcoin-like technologies where code is law and there's no sticky humans in the middle taking their cut. Thank you so much, Django. Have a good one. Thank you for being on PMFers.
Thank you, Austin. Appreciate you.